The US rail system is terrible. And here's why. First of all, let me clarify what I mean by bad. I'm not talking about the safety or reliability of the trains, although those could be improved as well. I'm talking about the speed, comfort, convenience, and affordability of the trains. In other words, how enjoyable and practical it is to travel by train in the US versus in Europe. Now, don't get me wrong. I love trains. I think they are a great way to see the country, meet new people, and reduce your carbon footprint. But I have to admit that traveling by train in the US can be frustrating, expensive, and time-consuming, especially when you compare it to traveling by train in Europe. So what are the main differences between the US and European train systems, and why do they exist? Well, there are many factors that contribute to this gap, but I'll focus on 4 of them: the freight-to-passenger ratio, the funding, the rail infrastructure, and the train design. The freight-to-passenger ratio is the percentage of rail traffic that is dedicated to moving goods versus moving people. In the US, this ratio is about 84% freight and 16% passenger, while in Europe it's about 20% freight and 80% passenger. This means that in the US, most of the rail network is used for transporting cargo, while in Europe, most of it is used for transporting people. This difference reflects the historical priorities of each region. The US railroads were built to move goods across a vast country with a sparse population, while the European railroads were mostly created to move large amounts of people between densely populated cities. As a result, the US railroads are optimized for long-distance and heavy-duty freight trains, while the European railroads are optimized for short-distance and high-speed passenger trains. The funding is the amount of money that is invested in building and maintaining the rail network. In the US, this funding comes mostly from private companies that own and operate the railroads, while in Europe it comes mostly from public authorities that subsidize and regulate the railroads. This means that in the US, the railroads are driven by market forces and profit motives, while in Europe they are driven by social and environmental goals. This difference affects how much money is available and how it is spent on improving the rail service. In the US, there is less money and less incentive to invest in passenger rail, since it is less profitable than freight rail. In Europe, there is more money and more incentive to invest in passenger rail, since it is more beneficial for society and the planet. As a result, the US rail service suffers from underfunding and neglect, while the European rail service benefits from funding and support. The rail infrastructure is the physical structure and equipment that make up the rail network. In the US, this infrastructure is more than twice as large as in Europe, but also much older and less advanced. In Europe, this infrastructure is smaller but newer and more modern. This means that in the US there are more miles of track, but fewer miles of high-quality track than in Europe. This difference affects how fast and smooth the trains can run on the rails. In the US, most of the tracks are not electrified or equipped with advanced signaling systems, which limits the speed and efficiency of the trains. In Europe, most of the tracks are electrified or equipped with advanced signaling systems, which enables the speed and efficiency of the trains. As a result, the US trains are slower and bumpier than the European trains. The train design is the shape and size of the trains that run on the rails. In the US, the trains are typically longer and wider to accommodate more freight, while in Europe, the trains are shorter and narrower to allow for more nimble movements and quicker acceleration. This means that in the US, the trains are heavier and harder to maneuver, while in Europe, the trains are lighter and easier to maneuver. This difference affects how comfortable and convenient the trains are for passengers. In the US, the trains have more space and amenities, but also more noise and vibration. In Europe, the trains have less space and amenities, but also less noise and vibration. As a result, the US trains are more spacious but less smooth than the European trains. So, there you have it. 4 reasons why the US has such a bad train system compared to Europe. Of course, there are more factors and nuances that I didn't cover in this video, but I hope you got the main idea. And I hope you don't hate me for being honest about the state of the US rail service. I'm not trying to bash it. I'm just trying to point out the areas where it could improve. And who knows, maybe one day, the US will catch up with Europe and offer a fast, comfortable, convenient, and affordable train service that we can all enjoy. Until then, I'll keep riding the rails and hoping for the best. And I hope you'll join me on my next train adventure. That's all for today's video. I hope you learned something new and interesting. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Goodbye.